cardiac electrical system. That would be the SA node, another oldie but goodie. What is the primary function of the hypoglossal nerve? Motor to tongue muscles. How did you miss that when we had it up front? Question was there twice. Should know it. It doesn't mean you have to change your answer. What is the primary function of the vagus nerve in relation to sensory perception? Doesn't do vision and hearing. This is the motor, not sensory. Taste. It doesn't do taste from the tongue. It does have the vestigial taste buds in the back of the throat. But it would be general somatic afferent sensations. Actually, that should be. There's one more right after here. So I will give it to everybody, which I guess is one person. Yay, so everybody gets it. Yeah, this should be general visceral afferent. The general sensory afferent would be to the ear. Okay, coastal lining would be visceral. Okay, I'm going to start with vestibular system part 1. Okay, in general, outline. We'll talk about the vestibular system, which consists of semicircular canals. There will also be an area we call the vestibule that has sensory receptors in it. Those will be autolytic organs. Okay, we'll mention a couple of the pathways and a couple of the reflexes. Okay. Vestibular system will have two different types of functions. One function responds to what we call static equilibrium or passive equilibrium. But basically what that means is it responds to linear acceleration. Basically, you're moving your body and the head's coming with you, hopefully. Right, so this is going to respond to forward, backward movement, up, down movement, side to side movement. See how fast I do that side to side movement. Should get everybody out. Side to side movement. Fast. Right, so that's linear acceleration, right? And that is static or passive equilibrium. Okay, the other one listed here is angular. That's going to be dynamic actively moving your head. So yes, no. Ear to shoulder, those type of movements. Okay? Those will be, the receptors for those will be located in semicircular canals. Okay? The vestibular system will have connections, it says areas of the brainstem and a little, cerebellum. But part of it is going to help with eye movement, and part of it helps you work against gravity. Sit up straight. Okay. Within the skull, there's a bony part we've mentioned multiple times in this class called the petrous part of the temporal part. A lot of things go on in that little piece of bone, petrous part of the temporal part. Inside, you've got a lot of little canals, openings, but you also have this other little bit of bone, often referred to as the bony labyrinth. On one side, you've got a spiral that looks like a snail shell. This is called the cochlea. It takes 2.5 turns. Okay. On the other side, you've got 3 loops. These are semicircular canals. And then between the semicircular canals and the cochlea, you've got the vestibule. Also shown in this picture are vestibular nerve and cochlear nerve. Together they make up the vestibulo-cochlear nerve. Vestibular nerves are going to go to our semicircular canals, the vestibule. The cochlear part goes to the cochlea. Inside our bony structure, inside our bony labyrinth, you've got a membrane. The membrane is called the membranous labyrinth. Running through the cochlea, we don't see it on this picture, but running through the cochlea, you've got the cochlear duct. And just like the cochlea, it will take 2.5 turns. Within the semicircular canals, you've got semicircular ducts with a T, not a K. Okay? At the base of the semicircular ducts, they balloon out. Okay? The ballooned out portion is called the ampulla. The ampulla. This is where the receptors are going to be for our semicircular ducts. The receptors are in the ampulla. Now, in the vestibule part, you have two sacs. Toward the semicircular canals, it's the utricle. Toward the cochlea, it's called the sac wall. Okay, these will be what contributes to the static equilibrium, the passive equilibrium. Their receptors are called maculae, M-A-C-U-L-A-E. Also in the vestibule, there are 2 openings. One is oval shaped. This is called the oval window. One is round shaped. It is called the round window. Yeah.
So if someone has like vertigo, is this the area that's being affected?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, somebody with vertigo, this is the area affected. Okay. We also have fluid in here. We have fluid Okay. Our semicircular canals and ducts are named. Okay, the one on top is the superior semicircular canal. It is also known as the anterior semicircular canal. Horizontal semicircular canal lies in the horizon, flat like that. It's also called the lateral semicircular canal. Lateral. Excuse me. And then you've got the posterior semicircular canal. Within the semicircular canals, in the ampulla, you've got hair cells. Hair cells. And you haven't had histology, right? Okay, hair cells are columnar. That means they look like little columns. And they have stereocilia on top. Stereocilia are like little hairs that come out. That's why they're called hair cells. There's going to be one stereocilia that is a little bit longer than the rest. It's called a kinocilium. Now the idea is when hairs go, if they get pushed toward the direction of the longest hair of the kinocilium, it activates those hair cells. They release a transmitter to free nerve endings at the base. Here are your free nerve endings at the base. Now with semicircular canals, we said there was fluid in here. We are actually inside the duct. Inside the duct. So the fluid in here, what was that called? Endolymph. Endolymph inside. When you move your head, you're moving that fluid.
Can you point where that is again?
Sorry?
Can you point to where that is again?
It would just be in here. The fluid. Okay, so it would be right here. Okay. Now on top of our hair cells, we've got this gelatin called a cupula. The gelatin is going to contain little crystals called otoconia. Otoconia. Okay. Well, the crystals in the fluid, so it forms a gel, like gel. Okay, so when this fluid moves around, sloshing back and forth, what it will do is it will push this gelatinous cupula. Because the hairs are caught in that cupula, it'll move either toward the kinocilium or away from the kinocilium. Okay. Keep that kind of idea in mind because that also works for hearing and it will work for our static kind of equilibrium. Just a little different structures, but the idea is similar. stuck in the hair cell, measuring its activity. So at rest, nothing happening. At rest, it actually is active. It's active at rest. If you push the hair toward the longest hair, excuse me, that increases the activity. If you go the opposite direction, that decreases the activity. So what we're really doing when we move our head is we're increasing or decreasing the activity of the hair cells. Questions? Okay, vestibular system. Okay. The utricle and saccule are referred to as otolithic organs or otolith organs. They also have hair cells that have stereocilia. The tallest one is called a kinocilium. There are free nerve endings at the base. Now, with the semicircular canals, we had a cupula, which was gelatin, and it had crystals in the gelatin. Okay. Here, instead of the gelatinous cup, there's a membrane that has the crystals on top. Okay. Gravity is important here. You need those crystals to weigh down the membrane so that the membrane gets caught in the hairs. And again, as you move, because those hairs are caught in that membrane, they move a little bit slower and they'll get pushed in one direction or the other. And again, that's called inertia. So here are the crystals. These are called otoliths. The receptor is called a macula, maculae with an E, it's plural. The orientation is important, so horizontally oriented in the utricle, vertically oriented in the saccula. Okay, horizontal is this way, vertical is that way. Okay. The utricle is going to respond to forward and back movement and side-to-side movement. Saccule will respond to up and down movement and side-to-side movement. Gravity and linear acceleration. Okay, gravity is what's holding down those crystals. And hidden in here is a description of the hair cells being bent. But again, moving your head backward, it bends those hairs backward. Moving your head forward, bends those hairs actually arranged so every movement or every slight movement really gets covered. There's a little groove in the middle here that the hair cells end up being oriented around. That little groove is called a striola. That's S-T-R-I-O-L-A. Okay. As you tilt your head, the hair cells tilt in the same direction, same sensory transduction as the semicircular canals. And again, you'll get this in hearing also. If you bend toward the tallest hair, it activates the cells, releases the transmitter to treat nerve endings. Okay. A couple pathways. So the neurons are actually located in a ganglion inside bone. The ganglion is called the vestibular ganglion. So you got, these are going to be bipolar neurons. So you got one set of fibers going outward. Those are called centrifugal fibers. Fugal, like a fugitive, or away from. And then the ones that go into the central nervous system are called centripetal, P-E-T-A-L. It's going to enter the cranium through the internal acoustic meatus. Enters the pons. Actually, between where the pons meets the medulla, there's a junction there called the pontomedullary junction. It will enter the lateral side. There are going to be 4 vestibular nuclei. 4. They're easy to remember: superior, inferior, medial, and lateral. Okay. For the static equilibrium, that's the one that involves the vestibule, the utricle saccule. The only vestibular nuclei involved will be medial, lateral, and inferior. Superior is not involved. Okay. This is for the static or passive. These fibers will end up descending. Okay, there's one bundle in particular that's called the vestibulospinal tract. It originates from the lateral vestibular nucleus. And it's also known as the lateral vestibulospinal tract because it starts at the lateral vestibular nucleus. You know, science people have to argue about something, so that's one of the things they argue about, not to keep lateral everything. The sort of argument is that we don't have a medial vestibulospinal tract, so if you don't have a medial, you don't need a lateral. The other argument is, well, we used to, we just changed the name of it. But the argument is that because it starts at the lateral vestibular nucleus, you have to leave lateral as the name. Okay, just recognize either way. There's another, we don't see it on this picture, but there's another descending bundle called the medial longitudinal fasciculus. And that's going to go to motor nuclei in the spinal cord that go to the muscles. You do musculoskeletal next quarter, right? Haven't done that yet. Okay. They're little tiny muscles that surround the bones of the vertebra. So the medial longitudinal fasciculus, the descending, will go to motor nuclei of the spinal cord that go to those little tiny muscles. So that we call them anti-gravity muscles. Helps you sit up straight. Works against gravity. You know, otherwise, gravity would crunch you. Okay. Now, the parts that are coming from the semicircular canals, they basically follow, you know, the same beginning as the static, but the kinetic stuff, semicircular canals, so they're also going to intracranium through the internal acoustic meatus. They enter the brain stem where the pons meets the medulla, the lateral side, and they'll go to 3 of those 4 nuclei. Okay. This time, the lateral nucleus is not involved. Okay, so with the kinetic, lateral nucleus not involved. Instead, superior nucleus takes its place. Everybody's replaceable. Right, so lateral doesn't work here, superior does. That's what you see going along the other side. They're going to ascend up, and the bundle of fibers, unfortunately, is called medial longitudinal fasciculus. So we end up with 2 separate bundles of medial longitudinal fasciculus. There's one ascending, that's part of the kinetic system. There's one descending, which is part of the passive system. All right, same name. Go figure. These ascending fibers go to nuclei that control eye movement. So you see it going to the abducens, you see it going to trochlear, you see it going to oculomotor. They're going to move your eyes when your head moves so that you don't lose what you're looking at. Now, there's also going to be a branch that will help you recognize what's going on. It's going to thalamus, in the head and neck area of the thalamus. It's right by the lateral fissure. So, the vestibular area of the cerebral cortex, right by the lateral fissure. Vestibulospinal reflex. So these ones are the descending going to spinal cord. You know, part of what this does is helps center your gravity, center of gravity. So it's going to respond to the idea of tipping over, falling. So if it feels like you're about to fall, it sends messages to those muscles to prevent that.
So is that proprioception?
Yeah, that's proprioception. Vestibular colic. Colic refers to your neck region. So this reflex, this pathway is called head writing. R-I-G-H-T, not W-R-I-T. Head's not writing. Yeah. But what this means is, well, think about when you walk. When you walk, you tip, and you tip, and you tip, and you tip. You don't notice that though. Everything's remaining on a horizontal plane. And that's because your head's making these little tiny adjustments. Right? Now, this isn't going to work on a roller coaster because the movement those little slight movements, like when you're walking, the eyes are going to, or the head's going to adjust to that. The eyes will too. But in this case, we're talking about the head. Vestibulo-ocular. Okay, this is the ascending branches, and yeah, here your eyes are going to move in response to head movement. Okay, a couple terms here for the vestibulo-colic. I said head righting, right? Keep your head straight. For the vestibulo-ocular, the term we use is compensatory eye movement. So the eyes move to compensate for the head movement. Okay. In this example, head is moving toward the left, so the eyes are going to move toward the right. We've got ipsilateral pathway, and we have some contralateral pathways. MLF is the medial longitudinal fasciculus. Diagram. Oh, I can have it. It's just repeating itself. So get it twice. I'm going to steal a video from another class.
From atomic particles to celestial bodies, all objects in the universe are in a perpetual state of motion. Just like the planet we stand on, we human beings are constantly moving through time and space.
Pay attention to these dance moves as part of the final.
Our journey through the world is chaotic. And tumbling through it, by all means, it should feel like chaos. So, why doesn't it? If everything is moving, how do we human beings still feel grounded? How do we find stability amongst the constant confusion of motion? How do we ever manage to land on our feet? Our eyes relentlessly scan our environment for cues as to where we are in relation to the objects around us, while proprioceptors continuously sample the position of our units in space. But there's one piece of this puzzle still missing, and that is the acceleration of our body through space. Movement is chaotic, and our bodies must be able to make sense of it. Each element of this chaos needs to be isolated within a confined space. The structure that confines the chaos, that senses acceleration, that allows the brain to understand movement. It's tiny. It's smaller than a fingernail. It's called the vestibula, and it's the organ of balance. Oh, and we have two of them. The tiny vestibulum sits within a labyrinth of canals within the petrous part of the temple.